Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Together in the Word, part of Lighthouse Community Church's online ministry. We're going through as a church, we're committing ourselves to reading a chapter a day through the Bible. And currently, this week, or actually in June, we're doing the book of Psalms. We're going to be we started June 1st with Psalm 101. And we're going to be going up through the end of the month, doing the equivalent psalm for each day. And this week we're going to be taking a look in this video installment. We're going to be taking a look at one of the psalms that we read this week, and that would be Psalm 109. And I picked that one out specifically because it's a bit of a challenging psalm, not necessarily to interpret it in terms of what's being said, but to look at the motivation behind what is said. It's a very challenging psalm. It can be just a bit awkward. It can be a little bit off-putting. The writer, who most likely, well, it's stated it's a psalm of David. There's no indication as far as why it shouldn't be viewed as David, but regardless, whoever the writer was, that makes some pretty strong statements that we need to consider and to understand why he would say what he said. Like, for instance, from verses 6 through about verse 20. Or verse 19, he talks things about appoint a wicked man over him. Let his days be few, verse 8. Verse 9, it says, let his children be fatherless and his wife a widow. Verse 10, let his children wander about and beg. Let them seek sustenance far from their ruined homes. He's making some pretty strong statements as far as what his desires are for this person. In fact, statements that would seem like they would contradict what the attitudes that God would have for his people. So we need to take a look at what's going on here, so we can get a good understanding of what the writer was trying to say. It begins, verse 1, he says, "O God of my praise." And then in verse 4, in verse 4, he says, I am in prayer. The first thing we got to understand is that whatever takes place here, the writer is turning it to God. He is talking to God. He is giving it to God. The burden, whatever his burden is, which we're going to look at in a little bit, he is given that to God. And it says at the end, with my mouth, verse 30, with my mouth I will give thanks abundantly to the Lord, and in the midst of many I will praise him. He stands at the right hand of the needy, to save him from those who judge his soul. Beginning of the psalm, the end of the psalm, it's the contents of whatever's going to be said has been released to God, given to God, and whatever is being talked about here, the writer's not taking into his own hands. He's not taking over for God. He is not seeking to accomplish these things on his own. He's making his case to God and making request of God and submitting himself to how God will handle the situation, which is very, very important for us to understand. But what he's talking about, who he's talking about, it begins with opposition. Verse 2 and verse 3 talk about that the writer has faced some opposition, and they've opened verse 2, wicked and deceitful mouth against me. They've spoken against me with a lying tongue. They've surrounded me with words of hatred and fought against me without cause. And then in return for my love, they act as my accusers. So the writer is facing great opposition, and it's in complete contradiction to how he has treated those he's talking about. He has given them love, he's cared for them, and they are returning with lying tongue and deceitful words, and he's surrounded with hatred. And so he goes, I am in prayer. His response to this experience, to this negative experience, a very powerful negative experience where he felt like he was surrounded with hatred, he is giving that to God. He's releasing it to God. And the thorough judgment of these people or this person is what the psalmist is seeking. He is saying, God, you judge this person. And really, as we go through it, what he's asking for is, God, judge him completely. Judge him completely. And the whole entirety of his life is covered. Appoint a wicked man over him. Give him somebody over him that's equivalent to himself. Let him taste his own medicine. Let him face what he has made others face, or what he's made me face. And And when he says, and it's important for us to look at, when it says, let his children be fatherless, his wife a widow, let his children wander about and beg, let them seek sustenance far from their ruined homes, verse 10, it seems awful and merciless to call upon an entire family for the sin of the father and the husband. But that doesn't go without precedent. In Joshua chapter 7, the sin of Achan, remember, God judged Israel and allowed them to be defeated, and thousands died because this one family disobeyed God. And it's called the sin of Achan because Achan took upon himself to take some of the spoil from a defeated foe. God said, get rid of it all, destroy all of it, don't take any of it for yourself. And Achan took some and hid it under his tent. And the implication was that his entire family was complicit with it. It'd be hard for them not to know what was inside their tent. And God had their entire family wiped out, including all their possessions, their animals, everything, as a judgment for their sin. The family in this day was a whole lot tighter, a whole lot closer. There was more solidarity within the family, and the implication with families at that time was that they would be all complicit in what was going on, and they would be identified as a family unit. So when the writer is calling for God to judge them, it's bring their sin upon sinners. Bring for God to judge those who had stood against Him, and it wasn't such a merciless thing. It was the whole family would have been participating in this. And then we get down a little bit further, and because it's easy to go, man, these are strong words just for something against himself. And that, boy, he seems like he sure is pent up and bent and wound tight because of what somebody has done to him. But look what the text says, verse 16, because he did not remember to show loving kindness, but persecuted the afflicted and needy man and the despondent in heart to put them to death. He also loved cursing, so it came to him, and he did not delight in blessing, so it was far from him. But he clothed himself with cursing as his garment. And that just doesn't mean that he cussed a lot. The cursing had to do with just his pronouncement of evil upon someone else. This person's life, the whole life of theirs was wrapped up in evil, not just the way he responded to and treated David, as it were, but his whole life, this was just the course of his life. And David, as he's crying out to God, saying, God, this is enough. Bring this man, bring his legacy, his whole legacy, bring it to an end. And in verse 19, it says, let it be to him as a garment with which he covers himself. And the whole idea there is, in verse 20, let this be the reward of my accusers from the Lord and of those who speak evil against my soul. Bring it back around. God, let him experience what he has made others experience. Bring the judgment that he's levied, bring it upon himself and upon his family. And then he, as we said before, he wraps up the psalm. But you, O God, the Lord, deal kindly with me for your name's sake. He submits it to the Lord. He feels very passionate. He's strong, feels strongly about the injustice that this man has brought, the evil that this person has brought, and this man's family, what they stand for. But he's not taking it out on his own. He's asking God, God, you vindicate me. You vindicate these people that he has so wrongly dealt with. You deal with him, and deal with him in thoroughness. Because the writer trusted God in his judgment upon wicked more than he trusted himself. And it's important for us to understand this isn't about a legal matter where necessarily a law was violated and where legal precedents had to be brought to bear upon a criminal, so to speak, but the character of a person and the way the character of this person played out with people all around them. He's asking God to judge that person. So this is a bit of a difficult psalm. I hope that gives you a little better perspective as you go through it as far as why the writer would speak such strong words. So we'll see you again next Wednesday as we continue reading through the Psalms. We'll be continuing on. We'll get back together next week. Thanks a lot. Hey, thanks for joining us today for Together in the Word. If you have any questions about what we're reading, about anything that we went through today, please reach out to me. You can reach me via email at lccnikiski@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you and look forward to hearing how God is using His Word in your life.